Russian military personnel in Krasnodar tried to escape from the commandant's office and staged a riot, outraged that the commanders released several detainees for money, said a relative of a military personnel and a lawyer. The day before, on April 18, on the territory of the military commandant of the Krasnodar Garrison and the territory of military unit 40304 on the street 3 Trudovaya, 3, in Krasnodar, more than 100 military personnel from different military units from different regions of the Russian Federation, recognized as voluntarily deserters, staged a riot. Some of them tried to escape. ASTRA told the relative of one of the servicemen from Sakhalin and the lawyer of 2 more servicemen who were detained in the territory. The incident happened yesterday because some of them were released for money. And they didn't come back in time. And the guys raised a riot. On what basis is someone released, who has money? We, for example, have no body. But we have no right to be here. Specifically, we, my husband, should be at home. And they started storming leadership. Why don't you let us go then? I know that some people there are generally kept with the category D, and some have no eyes, some have limbs, said Olga, whose husband has been kept in tents on the territory of the commandant's office in Krasnodar since December. And already on December 10th, he ended up in a mental institution from this commandant's office, because he felt bad there, because he can't be among the military, says Olga. She notes that the husband was diagnosed in a psychiatric clinic, and later assigned a fitness category, limited fitness. Also, in April 2025, the criminal case against the man was closed. They live there in tents. On the street. That is, when there were frosts in December, in January, in February, these are severe frosts, they were in tents. They drink everything there. My husband was beaten there 3 weeks ago, he was all blue, the woman adds. As told by ASTRA on the condition of anonymity, a lawyer representing the interests of 2 servicemen assigned to a unit in Krasnodar, some of them have been there for more than 6 months. According to her, they do not provide medical assistance to men, doctors are not allowed in part of the territory.
Я не знаю, мы говорим, что 100 человек там с изолятора.
The Russians will try to carry out some offensive operations. This was stated on air by the Ukrainian reserve major and veteran of the Russian-Ukrainian war, Alexei Getman. As the expert noted, the number of Russian occupation army on the front line has not changed. On the contrary, the number of personnel of the Russian Federation is gradually decreasing because their ability to attract new servicemen through mobilization and recruitment is less than what the Ukrainian armed forces destroy monthly. Even the average daily number of losses of Russians has already appeared, 1,250 occupiers, noted Getman. He stressed that the Russians not only cannot increase the number of personnel, but also have problems with the means that destroy the Ukrainian defense forces on a daily basis. Every month, the Russians lose up to 40,000 personnel. They can gain approximately the same number every month. In fact, this can be considered a negative balance. Therefore, the question arises: if the Russians cannot increase the number of personnel, then how can they conduct large-scale offensive operations? The same applies to equipment, which is also being destroyed on a large scale on the front line, he added. Earlier, another military expert, Ivan Stupak, stated that the Russian army does not have sufficient potential for a large-scale attack on all sections of the front line at once. According to the expert, an analysis of open sources shows that there is no significant accumulation of reserves along the entire 1,000-kilometer front line. To say that they have great opportunities along the entire front line with new forces and they can put pressure, I would not say that. These forces are not visible, Stupak emphasized. In addition, there are indications of a reduction in personnel in the Russian army. In particular, the military police, which previously performed secondary tasks at rear checkpoints, have begun to be transferred to the front lines. Although Russia stepped up the recruitment of contract soldiers in April, according to some sources, Moscow is able to recruit about 100 to 150 people every day. However, this is not enough to have a significant impact on the situation. They don't have enough people. They throw everyone to the front, the wounded, the lame, and the barefoot, the expert noted. The absence of a mass accumulation of equipment is also recorded. Mechanized assaults are rare, since the Russians take care of armored vehicles and use them only when there is a high probability of breaking through the Ukrainian defense. Ukraine's northern border is vastly different from the Donbas steppe, with more places to hide and more defensive positions. But Russia's grueling warfare has changed little, the Times reports. On the border with Sumy Oblast, dozens of occupiers are using quad bikes to seize at least some territory. Therefore, the task of the 4th Regiment of Ukrainian Rangers is to get ahead of the attack and stop it. The publication recalled that the Special Forces Regiment Rangers was created in March last year to carry out reconnaissance and assault missions. However, as the regiment commander with the call sign Bucha says, in the last few weeks, their role has been more reminiscent of fire extinguishers. They are testing our line of defense, conducting daily raids on villages, trying to find weak spots, said the colonel, who has been fighting against Russia since 2014. The Times explained that Bucha, translated from Ukrainian, means a garden for growing watermelons. As the publication writes, ceasefire talks may continue, but the Kremlin's desire for peace is not reflected in its military operations. In particular, Russia is now launching its offensive on several fronts at once. Most likely, Sumy is one of the main targets of the Russian Federation during this offensive. It is noted that the fields around the city are surrounded by dragon's teeth concrete anti-tank obstacles and are cut by networks of trenches. The Russians are trying to create a buffer zone. They will try to advance as far as they can, but they do not have the resources to try to reach Sumy, a source in the Ukrainian Defense Ministry told the publication. In return, Ukraine is conducting its own raids in the Kursk region and continues to occupy a small territory of the Russian Federation in order to prevent the enemy from accumulating its forces for an offensive. In particular, the Bakhchi regiment uses reconnaissance drones to identify supply chains that feed frontline forces so that they can be destroyed by American HIMARS artillery systems. As always, the Ukrainians are outnumbered. Among the Russian troops deployed to advance on Sumy are 2 brigades of supposedly elite forces. The 155th Marine Brigade, which had previously served in the Donbass, and the 810th Marine Brigade, which had served in Robotno in the Zaporizhia region, the Times added. At the same time, according to Bakhchi, their arrival had little impact, stressing that elite Russian units ceased to play an important role after May 2022 due to high casualties and a lack of training among the reinforcements. The military man says that the Russian Federation has another elite brigade that the Ukrainians are fighting against, namely the 76th Airborne Brigade. However, Bucha noted that these troops are poorly trained and equipped. Last week, Bakhchi fighters stopped a raid on quad bikes by 12 soldiers of the 76th with the help of drone and artillery. The sole survivor who was captured signed a contract while serving a prison sentence in Saratov in southern Russia just 2 weeks ago. Due to a shortage of night vision equipment, the Russians mostly carried out these raids during the day. Every day along the line defended by the Bakhchi regiment, the Russians lose about a dozen men. The Times concluded,